Welcome everyone to this week's lecture on Jewish Americans. Our reading talked about the distinct qualities of Russian Jewish immigration to the United States. Unlike other immigrant groups we've spoken about, Russian Jews did not have the option of returning to their homeland once they left. They were fleeing anti-Semitic violence called pogroms, where Jews were massacred and their shops and synagogues were destroyed. By World War I, 1/3 of Jews in Russia and Eastern Europe had migrated to the United States. Many Jews emigrate as families, and half of the Jewish immigrants were women. The majority of them settled in the Lower East Side of New York City, living in crowded tenement apartments with family and boarders. And this image would be one example of what is referred to when we think about tenements in this particular time period. The reading talked about how many Jewish daughters came to New York ahead of the rest of their families because they had the sewing skills to find work in the garment industries. 60% of them worked in the garment industry. 60% of the Jewish population worked in the garment industry, but the majority of them were women. Now, this concentration in the garment factory became tragic in this event known as the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory of 1911. 800 workers, mostly women, were trapped in the fire. 146 workers died in the fire, were unable to escape. Women had participated in a strike against the factory in 1909, addressing some of the safety issues and other issues that they were experiencing as workers in this factory. In this strike, 20,000 women participated in the call for better treatment by employers, 52-hour work week, overtime pay, and union recognition. And in the video about this event, you'll learn more about the factory itself, how women worked and what their working conditions were like, and what resulted in this tragedy where so many people died as a result of this fire. One of the issues was that the factory was concentrated in the top 3 floors of the building. And at the time, the hoses for the fire department didn't reach further up in the building. So the top 2 floors were just engulfed in flames. They couldn't do anything about it. There were also other situations where women couldn't get out the doors. There was only one exit, or the exit door was closed. Some workers in one of the floors weren't even aware that there was a fire beneath them. So there were all sorts of conditions that resulted in this tragedy. And again, because so many Jewish women were working in this industry, a significant number of the lives lost as a result of this fire were from this Jewish community. The reading also talked about assimilation and how Jewish folks related to this process of assimilation. And they began by learning American ways in a process they called purification, which meant acquiring middle-class refinement in behavior and taste. They made an active effort to learn English. Many anglicized their names to sound like Americans. They participated in American holidays and consumerism. They took vacations at resorts because at the time this was perceived as what the American middle class did. And women became housewives as a sign of middle-class success. However, what we see is that regardless of their attempts of trying to assimilate, thinking that if they assimilated, they would be accepted into mainstream American society, and this would somehow protect them from anti-Semitism and any other forms of discrimination, they found that this was not the case. We see it in the example of the backlash that's experienced by Jewish students at Harvard, where as anti-Semitic complaints arose against the Jewish students, They were perceived as dangerous and unassimilable. The president of the university, President Lowell, believed that the Jewish students were bad for Harvard. New admissions policies were put in place to restrict Jewish students. And the 1924 restrictionist immigration laws passed, were supported by the Harvard president. So you see some of these connections between the president of Harvard, and some of the anti-Jewish, anti-immigrant kind of restrictions and laws that were passed. So while Jewish parents focused on getting their sons the best education they could in order to achieve American middle-class success, their increasing numbers in elite institutions encountered a backlash. New policies, the new admissions policies that were created stressed well-roundedness and the need for regional diversity so that there shouldn't be a concentration of students from New York City. This became sort of code word for Jewish students. They were required to submit a photo so that admissions officers could identify who was Jewish for those who had changed their names, believing that there were certain features that were generalizable to all Jewish individuals. So what we see is that although they were doing their best to achieve middle-class American success so that they could assimilate, they were still discriminated against. The more successful Jews were, the more they were discriminated against. Job listings started specifying Christians only. They experienced housing discrimination through restrictive covenants that prohibited the selling and renting of property to Jews. And when they were finally able to move out of the Lower East Side and into suburban communities, they were moving into suburban Jewish enclaves where they felt they were safer. So this ends our lecture for this week. I will see you guys next time.